The Galactic Empire had existed for 11,400 years. It had begun as a coalition of 9 species who agreed on a single principle, that the galaxy was too large and too dangerous to govern itself. By the time of this story, it had grown to 214 member species, administered across 870 star systems, with a standing military fleet of 4.2 million registered warships. Its grand conclave on Sorvith Prime was the oldest continuously operating governing body in known space. The floor of its central chamber had been carved from black volcanic rock by the hands of 60,000 laborers over 11 years. The ceiling rose 40 meters above the chamber floor and showed nothing: no stars, no windows, no sky, only stone. The air in the chamber smelled of polished mineral and recycled oxygen. The same recycled oxygen that had circulated through the hall for 3 centuries without replacement, carrying the faint chemical memory of every species that had ever breathed inside it. Sulfur compounds from the Vrethkai delegation, the sweet metallic trace of Kavathi biology, the faint brine that followed the Tessari wherever they went. The chamber held 4,800 seats. On this particular morning, 3,200 of them were occupied. High Chancellor Sorvith took the speaking platform at 900 hours. He was Kavathi, 8 limbs folded with the patient symmetry of a man who had never needed to rush. His skin was the color of hammered amber. He was 31 years into his chancellorship. He had administered 214 species, overseen 6 military engagements, ratified 1,100 treaties, and in all that time had made exactly 2 decisions he considered genuinely difficult. This morning's address was not one of them. "The record has been corrected," he said. His voice was even, bureaucratic. The kind of voice that delivered news the way a building delivers weather, without apology, without expression. Earth has been absent from the Galactic Registry for 1,000 years. Some delegations have, on 7 separate occasions over that period, requested a formal review of the erasure decision. The Council has reviewed those requests. The Council's position remains unchanged. He paused. In the front rows, the Vrethkai delegation sat in their ceremonial conqueror's plates, broad, layered, the color of old iron. Admiral Grath Veldurin, commander of the Empire's 3rd expansion fleet, sat at the center of the Vrethkai row. He was listening, not carefully, with the mild attention of a man whose conclusions are already made. Earth, Sorvith continued, was a Category 7 Death World civilization that refused alignment with the Conquered across 4 formal negotiation attempts spanning 22 years. The risk to 12 neighboring systems was classified as unacceptable. The erasure was an administrative outcome. The decision was correct. It remains correct. From the highest observation row, the row reserved for the oldest member species, the ones who attended not as voting delegates but as witnesses, Elder Velnarama of the Tessari sat with 4 thin hands folded in her lap. The Tessari were small. They had been traveling between stars for 31,000 years, longer than any other species in the Empire. They had 11 members on their entire home world. They sent 1 representative to the conclave. That representative had not spoken in this chamber in 400 years. She watched Sorvith finish his address. She watched the delegations begin to talk quietly among themselves. She watched Grath Veldurin lean to the Vrethkai officer beside him and say something that made the officer nod. She did not speak. She did not need to yet. After the session adjourned, a young Kavathi aide, fresh-faced, 4 years into his posting, still impressed by the size of the chamber, approached Velnarama in the corridor outside. "Elder," he said, "you've been attending sessions for longer than our records go. What do you make of the Earth question?" She stopped walking. She looked at him for a moment. "Come back," she said quietly, "and ask me that question in 6 weeks." Then she walked on. 2 light-years from Sorvith Prime, in a section of open space that no Empire chart had ever marked with anything worth naming, there was a station. It had no registered designation. It appeared on no shipping lane. Its hull had been constructed from salvaged rock and compressed ice over a period of 40 years, built by crews that worked only in sensor-dead windows, brief periods between automated Empire survey sweeps, rotating in 3-month shifts. From the outside, in the cold dark between stars, it looked like a slow-drifting fragment of debris. Its surface absorbed 94% of incoming sensor pings. Its internal temperature was maintained at 3 degrees above the ambient void. Its internal name was Meridian Station. Admiral Siravas had been commanding it for 9 years. She was 44 years old. She wore a gray coat with no rank insignia. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band she had been replacing with identical rubber bands for 6 years. The same band, in principle, which was how she thought about a lot of things. Her face was the kind of face that did not move much when she was thinking. Her eyes moved. Her face did not. On the morning of Sorvath's address, which Meridian Station received via encoded passive intercept 4.2 hours after it was delivered, Voss was drinking cold tea from a chipped ceramic cup and reading a document she had read 12 times before. It was 2 pages long. It had no title. Its first line was, "We will return. We will be ready." It was 847 years old. She set the cup down, folded the document along its original creases, and put it back in the left breast pocket of her coat. Lieutenant Darrow Chen appeared in the doorway. He was 31 years old, 9 years on Meridian, the kind of person who delivered bad news as a series of facts in the same tone he used for good news. He had 2 inches of clearance above the door frame and used 1.8 of them. "The Chancellor's address just came through," Chen said. "7th request for review, denied." Voss nodded once. "Same vote count as the last 6. Off by 3, it's getting less close, not more." She picked up the tea, put it down again. "Any movement in the outer rim?" "Quiet," Chen said. "Vane 7 logged routine traffic, nothing unexpected." She nodded, "Thank you, Darrow." He left. She sat with the cold tea and the silence and the 847-year-old document she did not need to unfold to remember. On the wall beside her desk there was a photograph. A mountain range, golden light on pale rock, a strip of blue ocean at the edge of the frame. It was not a photograph anyone living had taken. It was a copy of a copy of a copy, degraded through 3 generations of digital transfer. The mountains were still there. The light was still gold. She looked at it for a moment. Then she went back to work. Admiral Grath Veldurin received the distress signal from Outpost Vane 7 at 3:41 hours, 16 days after the conclave session. He was eating. Not a meal, a compressed ration block, the kind fleet officers consumed on long-range patrol when there was no reason to stop for anything. He read the signal once. Set the ration block down on the console with the particular care a man uses when he has already decided something and is giving himself the time to confirm it. Outpost Vane 7 was a small automated monitoring station on the outer rim, sitting at the edge of what had, 1,000 years ago, been registered as Sector 12 of Earth's territorial boundary. That sector had been officially recatalogued as unregistered drift space after the erasure. Its files listed 0 registered inhabitants, 0 registered vessels, 0 registered installations. The signal from Vane 7 was 4 words. "Something is moving here." Durin looked at the coordinates, looked at the 4 words, looked at the coordinates again. He called his tactical officer, a young Vrethkai named Sekt Varath who had been awake for 18 hours, and showed it in the deliberate way he moved his hands. "Get me an entry vector on anything inside the old Sector 12 boundary, and pull the archived survey data from the last 300 years. "The last 300 years, Sekt said. "That's a significant." "All of it," Durin said. He had the kind of certainty in his voice that 23 campaigns and 9 taken worlds produced. He had never lost a single engagement, not one ship in his last 4 operations. He was not afraid. He was, if anything, mildly curious, the way a man who has seen everything is occasionally curious about the one thing that doesn't fit the pattern. Sekt pulled the data. It took 11 minutes. "There's nothing," Sekt said. 300 years of survey sweeps. 14 passes through Sector 12, all registering void, no structures, no signals, no mass anomalies. "Until now," Durin said. "Until now," Sekt agreed. Durin leaned back. He looked at the 4 words again. Something is moving here. He thought about the last 1,000 years of Sector 12. He thought about the absence of anything, not just absence of life, but absence of the kind of debris that civilizations leave behind. No wreckage, no signal decay, no residual heat signatures from the erasure itself, which should have left thermal traces detectable for 500 years. Clean, he thought, not dead, clean. He ordered 2,200 ships to Sector 12. On Meridian Station, at 3:47 hours, 6 minutes after Durin's signal reached his tactical officer, Lieutenant Chen walked into Voss's workspace. Voss was already awake. She had been awake for 3 hours, reviewing a 12-year-old logistics report on fuel cell yield ratios. The kind of document that made Chen wonder how she slept at all, until he realized she mostly didn't. "They found vein 7 signal," Chen said. She looked up, not quickly, the way she looked at things that she had been waiting a long time to hear. "Two. Duran, 3rd Expansion Fleet. He's pulling Sector 12 survey data." She was quiet for 4 seconds. "How many ships is he moving?" Chen looked at his screen. "Initial order, 2,200. She was quiet again. Then she stood up, pushed the logistics report to the side, picked up the chipped ceramic cup, looked at it for a moment, then set it down in a different place, an unconscious settling, the kind a person does when something is shifted. "Wake Asheville," she said, "all wings." Chen paused at the door. He had served with her for 9 years, and he had never heard those words. He had trained for them. He had run the activation protocols in simulation 14 times. He had simply never heard them said aloud by a real voice in a real room. "How many wings?" he asked. He knew the answer. He asked anyway. "All," she said. He nodded once. He left. 2 corridors away, in the Meridian Station briefing room, Elder Velnarima sat in a chair that was too wide for her small frame, eating a piece of flatbread she had been given by the station's cook. A 22-year-old from Colony Asheville, forenamed Pira, who had never met a Tessari before and had asked Velnarima, with complete sincerity, if she preferred salt. She had said yes. She had been on Meridian Station for 3 weeks. Nobody had told her to come. She had simply arrived alone on a small Tessari transit vessel that had materialized off the station's sensor range at 200 hours one morning and waited to be noticed. When Chen had opened a channel, she had said, "I would like to speak with whoever is in charge. I've been waiting 400 years to have this conversation." Voss had met with her for 6 hours. Then Voss had given her a room and a standing invitation to the briefing room. Now eating the flatbread with salt, Velnarima looked up at the station's speaker system as the activation signal began to move through the corridors. Not a sound, but a change in the quality of the air, a shift in the frequency of systems coming online. She folded the remaining flatbread carefully, set it on the table. "Finally," she said, to no one in particular. Operation Asheville had been running for 847 years. It had begun the year after the erasure, not with anger, not with a declaration, but with a single document filed by 3 surviving Earth colony ships that had been outside the Empire's reach when the order was executed. The ships were the Perseverance, the Covenant, and a cargo vessel called the Aldera that had been 4 light-years from Earth running a routine mineral survey. Their combined crew numbered 312 people. Their combined resources amounted to 3 functional reactors, 14 months of food stores, and 847 years of work. The document was 2 pages long. It had no title. It said, "We will not return to ask for justice. We will not return to beg for recognition. We will return when we are ready, and on that day the question of what Earth was will no longer be a question. We will return. We will be ready." It was signed by all 312 names. In the 847 years that followed, those 3 ships became 12 colonies, hidden in the dead systems of 6 uninhabited stars in what the Empire's charts labeled as worthless void. The 12 colonies became 34. The 34 became the network of 71 installations that answered to the Asheville command structure. Their population across all 71 nodes was 2.4 million people, all of them born into the operation, all of them raised with the 2-page document and the 312 names, all of them doing one specific job in a specific part of a plan that was now 847 years old. Commander Yusuf Navarro's job was Wing Command. He was 37 years old. He had been born on Colony Asheville 3, a rock ball 40,000 kilometers in diameter in a long orbit around a cold red dwarf with no name on any Empire chart. He had never seen Earth. He had seen the photograph. Everyone in Asheville had seen the photograph. The same photograph copied 847 times, the mountains and the golden light and the strip of blue ocean. He kept a copy folded in the left breast pocket of his flight suit behind the zipper against his chest. He had carried it since he was 12. His wing comprised 800 ships. Each ship had been constructed in zero-signal shadow over periods of 8 to 14 years, one section at a time, assembled in dead-rock shipyards behind electromagnetic shielding that had taken 40 years to perfect. Each ship was painted flat black, not the operational black of Empire stealth coatings, but a custom compound developed across 200 years of materials research, absorbing 97.3% of all wavelengths, including the 4 that Empire sensors used as primary scan bands. The flagship of the entire operation was the Black Meridian, a dreadnought-class vessel 4.3 kilometers long, built over 31 years in a shipyard hidden inside a hollow planetoid, running on a drive system that left no thermal signature, a propulsion technology that had required 190 years of physics work and 14 years of prototype testing in a star system 3,000 light-years from the nearest Empire patrol route. At 6:12 hours, all 14,000 ships in the Asheville network received the activation code. The code was 6 characters, no words, just a sequence that every crew member in every Asheville installation had trained to recognize since they were old enough to train. It came through on a frequency the Empire had never logged because it had never needed to, a narrow-band compressed signal that lasted 0.4 seconds and looked, to any receiver not calibrated for it, like thermal noise from the surrounding rock. And then they waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Every crew had trained for it. Navarro had run simulations of the activation sequence 31 times. In every simulation, the hardest moment was not the combat. It was the 19 minutes between activation and deployment, 19 minutes of sitting at a station that was live, in a ship that was armed, knowing that 1,000 years of preparation had just reached its final hour and doing nothing. Not moving, not firing, not making a sound. 19 minutes, the way people wait when they have been waiting 1,000 years, and 19 more minutes means nothing. At 6:31 hours, the deployment window opened. Navarro looked at his 6 wing officers. They did not speak. He touched the left breast pocket of his flight suit, then he opened the ship-wide channel. Asheville, this is Navarro, move. At the same moment, 14 light hours away, in the killing corridor of Sector 12, Admiral Duran's 2,200 ships were crossing the old boundary marker, the point where, 1,000 years ago, Earth's territorial registration had ended and Imperial space had begun. Duran was on his bridge. It was a wide, cold room of pale gray alloy, functional, clean, designed for the kind of man who found comfort in precision. His tactical officer, Sect Varath, was monitoring the sector scan. His communications officer had an open channel on 3 standard hailing frequencies. Nothing was responding. Nothing in visual range, Sect reported. No heat signatures, no mass readings. Whatever the Vane 7 station detected, I'm not picking it up here. Duran looked at the sector map. He had crossed the boundary at the entry vector that any tactical commander would use, the standard approach, the wide corridor with the flattest gravitational gradient, the route that every survey ship had taken through Sector 12 for 300 years. Move to secondary formation, he said. I want eyes on every quadrant. If something moved here, it moved because it wanted Vane 7 to see it. Sect paused, sir. A signal that's specific, Duran said. 4 words, something is moving here, not an automated anomaly flag, a curated transmission. He looked at the empty sector. Someone wanted us to come. He was correct. He did not yet understand what that meant. At 6:19 hours on Meridian Station, Lieutenant Chen had pulled up the Sector 12 entry vector logs. 300 years of Empire survey pass data, cross-referenced against the single approach file from 1,000 years ago when the erasure fleet had entered Earth's territorial boundary. The vectors were identical. Not similar, not close. Identical down to the 4th decimal of bearing calculation, as if the Empire's tactical computers presented with the same geography had arrived at the same optimal approach independently, which they had, because the approach was correct. The math was correct. Any competent tactical commander with Duran's experience would take that vector. Chen highlighted it in yellow on the tactical display and said nothing. Voss looked at it for 3 seconds. Her face did not move. Then she looked at the photograph of the mountains on the wall. Then she said, "Open a channel to Duran, standard Imperial frequency." Chen looked at her. "We'll be revealing our position." "That's fine," she said. He opened the channel. On Duran's bridge, the communications officer looked up with genuine surprise. "Sir, incoming hail, standard Imperial frequency, point of origin." He looked at his screen again. Sir, there's no point of origin. The signal is coming from inside the sector. Duran stood up slowly, on audio. A voice came through, a human voice, female, calm in the way that cold rooms are calm, not warm, not hostile, simply at a temperature that had been maintained for a very long time. Admiral Duran, the voice said. This is Admiral Sira Voss, Commanding Officer of Operation Asheville. I am transmitting on this frequency as a courtesy. You entered Sector 12 on the same vector the Erasure fleet used 1,000 years ago. I want to make sure that was not an accident. Duran looked at the empty sector, still empty, still showing nothing on scan. Who are you? He said. We are the reason, Voss said. That Sector 12 has been clean for 1,000 years. We have been waiting for you. We are glad you came. A pause. Admiral, Duran said, I have 2,200 ships in this sector. I see nothing on any of my scans. You should identify yourself and your position and stand down. A shorter pause. I understand, Voss said. That's why I'm hailing you first. The mines are already active. I want to give you 4 minutes to recall your fleet before they enter the second boundary. Silence on Duran's bridge. What second boundary? He said. Darrow, Voss said, not to Duran, to someone else. On every screen on Duran's bridge, simultaneously, the sector map updated. Where there had been empty void, there were now 18,000 points of light, each one a precision mine, arranged in 4 layered corridors across the only exit vectors Duran's fleet could use. Behind them, bracketing the entry corridor on 3 sides, came the mass readings, 14,000 ships, appearing on scans as they dropped their emission suppression 1 vessel at a time. In sequence, the way a hand of cards is laid down slowly to make sure everyone at the table can read each one. On Duran's tactical display, in 6 seconds, the sector went from empty to surrounded. Sect Varath said something under his breath in Vrethkai. It was not a tactical assessment. Admiral, Duran said, his voice had lost the mild curiosity, not gained fear, not yet, just lost the certainty. What is this? This, Voss said, is what we built while you weren't watching. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That was how long Duran had before his forward elements reached the second boundary and the mines went active. He spent 1 minute and 40 seconds looking at the tactical display. He spent 40 seconds ordering SEC to run an independent scan confirmation. He spent 30 seconds processing the result, which confirmed every reading. He spent 12 seconds doing the math, 2,200 ships in a corridor bounded by 14,000 and 18,000 mines, and finding no outcome in the calculation that he wanted to put his name on. He spent the remaining 1 minute sending the recall signal. It was a partial recall. He pulled his forward elements back 8 kilometers, his rear echelon held. He opened a channel. Voss, he said, you have our attention. Yes, she said, I know. Navarro's 800-ship wing held position on the northern bracket. He was watching the Empire fleet's movement on his tactical display with the focused calm of a man who had spent 25 years training for a 9-minute window and was now watching the clock. The Empire fleet did not move past the second boundary. In the 6 minutes that followed, Voss and Duran spoke. It was not a negotiation. It was not a conversation between equals trying to find compromise. It was a debrief, Voss presenting a sequence of facts, each one precise, each one delivered in the same temperature as the first. 847 years of preparation, 14,000 ships, 2.4 million people across 71 installations, 18,000 mines seated in 4 corridors across a period of 19 years, a drive technology that left no thermal signature, a sensor-absorbing hull compound that had taken 200 years to develop, and the entry vector, the same entry vector, she noted, that had been used 1,000 years ago. You were watched from the moment you crossed the outer marker, she said. Outpost Vane 7 signal was generated by our monitoring array. We sent it because we needed to verify your response time and your formation pattern before activation. Duran was quiet for 3 seconds. You lured us in. We invited you in, Voss said. There's a difference. We could have activated in the outer rim and destroyed your fleet before you reached Sector 12. We chose to meet you here, in the place where it started. Another silence. What do you want? Duran said. The same thing we've wanted for 1,000 years, she said. Recognition, The formal acknowledgement that Earth exists, that it existed, that the decision 1,000 years ago was not an administrative outcome, it was an atrocity, and that the 312 people who signed a 2-page document and spent the next 847 years building this response were not destabilizing the conquered. They were answering it. On Durin's bridge, Sect Varath was watching the tactical display. He had stopped trying to find a tactical solution in the numbers. There wasn't one. The 14,000 ships had not moved. The mines had not activated. The human admiral had not raised her voice once in 9 minutes of transmission. He thought about the entry vector, identical to the one from 1,000 years ago. He thought about what it would take, what kind of organizational memory, what kind of civilizational commitment, to track a fleet vector across 10 centuries and use it as the site of a response. "Admiral," he said quietly to Durin, "I think we should listen." Durin spent 4 minutes reviewing his options. He had 2,200 ships against 14,000, and a minefield he could not navigate without a path that the opposing fleet controlled entirely. He had no reinforcements within 6 hours. He had one open channel and an opponent who had apparently been waiting 1,000 years for this conversation and was in no particular hurry. He made a decision, not because the mathematics left him no choice, they did, but because in 23 campaigns and 9 taken worlds he had learned to recognize the moment when continuing to fight was no longer a military calculation. It was something else, something smaller. "Transmit on all frequencies," he said to his communications officer. "Fleet-wide and relay to Sorvith Prime." He opened the channel. "Admiral Voss," he said, "I am relaying this transmission to the Grand Conclave on Sorvith Prime. Please repeat your statement of record." A pause of 2 seconds. "Gladly," she said. She spoke for 7 minutes, clear, even cold. The founding document, the 312 names, the 847 years, the 71 installations, the 14,000 ships, the 2.4 million people who had been born into a plan they did not choose and had spent their lives executing because 312 people in 3 ships had decided that the only answer worth giving took 1,000 years to build. On Sorvith Prime, High Chancellor Sorvith received the Relay 14 light hours after it was sent. He listened to it once. Then he sat down in the chamber carved from black volcanic rock, and he listened to it again. And then, in the Grand Conclave's observation row, where she had sat in silence for 400 years, Elder Velnarima of the Tessari received the transmission on a small personal receiver she carried in the sleeve of her robe. She listened without moving. When it was finished, she sat for 41 seconds in the particular stillness of someone who has been right about something for a very long time. Then she stood, walked to the speaking platform, and said for the first time in 400 years, in a chamber that went absolutely silent the moment she moved, 9 words. "The record must be corrected. The names must be restored." On the Black Meridian, in the command center that Voss had occupied for 9 years, Chen set down a report he had been holding and looked at her. "Conclave is in emergency session," he said. She nodded. "Durin's fleet is holding position. No hostile movement." She nodded again. "Navarro is asking if he should stand down." "Not yet," she said, "when the vote comes back." She went to the wall, looked at the photograph. Mountains, golden light, blue ocean, a copy of a copy of a copy. The mountains were still there. Chen watched her. He had a question. He had been holding it for 9 years, and he had never asked it because she had never indicated she wanted it asked. He asked it now, quietly, in the way things get asked when a 1,000-year-old plan reaches its last hour. "Admiral, what happens if the vote is no?" She looked at the photograph for 3 more seconds. "Then we come back in another 1,000 years, she said, "but it won't be no." It was not no. The vote was 3,100 to 412. The fastest formal decision the Grand Conclave had rendered in 800 years. The motion on the floor was simple: restore the Earth record, acknowledge the erasure as an error of governance, grant formal recognition to the Asheville colonies as successor communities of Earth with full standing in the conquered. It passed at 1743 hours. Voss received the result at 1757 hours, accounting for transmission delay. She looked at it for 7 seconds, then she opened the fleet-wide channel. "Asheville," she said, "stand down all wings, the record has been corrected." On 14,000 ships, across 71 installations, across 2.4 million people, silence. And then, after 6 seconds of silence, a sound that no one had designed or planned for. Applause. Coming through the intership channels in waves, starting from the ship's nearest to Meridian Station and moving outward, the way sound moves when it has been held in for 1,000 years. Navarro, in his flight suit with the photograph in his left breast pocket, sat on the bridge of his ship and listened to it and said nothing. His face was wet. He let it be wet. In the entry corridor of Sector 12, on the bridge of the Vrethkai command vessel, Sect Vareth looked at the tactical display. 14,000 black ships that had just powered down their combat systems simultaneously, like lights going out in sequence across a dark sky. He thought about the entry vector. He thought about 1,000 years. He opened his personal log and wrote 4 words. I was here for this. The Grand Conclave's formal restoration ceremony was 6 weeks later. It was not a large event. The Conclave's protocol office had prepared materials for a 4,000-seat ceremony. Voss requested a room with 300 seats. The protocol office, uncertain how to process a civilization that had just presented 14,000 warships, and then asked for a smaller room, complied. 312 names were read aloud. The original 312, from the Perseverance, the Covenant, and the cargo vessel Aldara, the names of the people who had signed a 2-page document in 3 ships 847 years ago and started building. Each name was read by a different person, crew members from the 14,000 ships, colonists from the 71 installations, people who had grown up with those names on classroom walls and memorial plaques, and in the daily acknowledgement that Asheville communities recited at the beginning of each shift. We will return, we will be ready. Navarro read the last name. He was still wearing his flight suit. Voss had asked him if he wanted to wear dress uniform, and he had said no, with the particular certainty of someone who has thought about it. After the ceremony, he went outside. On the surface of Sorveth Prime, which the Tessari had chosen as the ceremony location because it was where the erasure had been authorized, there was a stone courtyard with pale rock that caught the system's sun at a low angle in the evening. It looked, if you tilted your head, if you let yourself see it, something like mountains in golden light. He stood there for a while. He touched the left breast pocket of his flight suit. He thought about Colony Asheville 3, the red dwarf, the cold, the photograph on every classroom wall, the acknowledgement at the beginning of every shift. He took the photograph out. He looked at it for the first time in 9 years, really looked, without it being a ritual, without it being a symbol, just seeing it. Mountains, golden light, blue ocean at the edge. He put it back. High Chancellor Sorveth listened to Admiral Voss's 7-minute statement of record 6 times over the following 3 days. Each time, he arrived at the same place, the part where she described the 312 names and the 2-page document, and the decision to build rather than to demand. And each time he found the same absence where his response should be. He had governed for 31 years. He had administered 214 species. He had made 2 decisions he considered genuinely difficult. He sat in the chamber carved from black volcanic rock, in the recycled air that had not changed in 3 centuries, and he tried to understand how 1,000 years of silence had become this. Not the fleet. He understood the fleet. He had seen fleets. He understood the mathematics of what 847 years could build if the people building it were committed and careful. He did not understand the patience. He did not understand what kind of civilization, facing erasure, chose to say we will be ready instead of any of the other things a civilization might say. He was still sitting with that question when Elder Velnarima appeared in the doorway. She was carrying flatbread with salt. She sat down across from him without being invited, which she had been doing in these chambers for 31,000 years of her species' history, and was not about to stop. "You have a question," she said. "I have several," he said. "You have one," she said. "The others are versions of the same one." He was quiet. "You want to know," she said, "how a civilization decides to be patient for 1,000 years." "Yes." She took a piece of flatbread. She considered it. "They didn't decide to be patient," she said. "They decided to be ready. Those are different things. Patient means you are waiting for someone else to act. Ready means you are building toward the moment when you will act yourself. They were never waiting. They were always working." She paused. That is a different civilization than you thought you were dealing with. She stood, she left the flatbread on the table. In the corridor, she passed a young Kavathi aide who had approached her 6 weeks ago and asked about the Earth question. He was still fresh-faced. He would be less so in 6 weeks. "Elder," he said, "was it what you expected?" She walked past him, then she stopped. "No," she said, "it was exactly what I expected. That is what made it extraordinary." Then she turned and looked at him fully, something she had not done in the first conversation, something she did now because now it mattered that he remember. "When a species is erased," she said, "and it does not scream, and it does not beg, and it does not vanish, when instead it goes quiet and goes to work, you are not dealing with a defeated species. You are dealing with a species that has decided something. Remember that." She walked on. At 1917 hours, on the surface of Sorvith Prime, in the pale stone courtyard that caught the evening light at a low angle, Commander Yusuf Navarro was still standing with his hand over his left breast pocket when Admiral Voss came and stood beside him. They stood there for a while. The light was doing the thing he had seen in photographs for his entire life, hitting the pale rock at an angle that made it look, if you let yourself see it, golden. "It doesn't look exactly like the photograph," he said. "No," she said, "it doesn't." "Close," he said. "Close," she agreed. They stood there until the light was gone. Later, much later, the incident would be recorded in the conclave's formal annals as the Asheville recognition, and those 3 words would be as much as most species knew about it. What actually happened in Sector 12 on the morning that 14,000 black ships uncloaked in a single corridor, and an admiral with no rank insignia spoke for 7 minutes on a standard imperial frequency? That version lived in smaller places. It lived in the 312 names on a classroom wall in Colony Asheville 3. It lived in the 4 words Sect Varath wrote in his personal log that morning. "I was here for this," which he never deleted, and which, 30 years later, his students would read as the opening line of the account he eventually wrote. It lived in the flatbread Elder Velnarima left on Sorvith's table. It lived in a rubber band. It lived in a photograph that a commander had carried for 25 years against his chest, through 19 minutes of the hardest waiting, through the first morning on pale stone that caught the light like mountains, close, not exact, close enough. And it lived in the 9 words that Elder Velnarima had spoken in the Grand Conclave for the first time in 400 years, the words that had cracked open the vote that had taken 6 minutes to deliver what 7 formal requests over 1,000 years could not. The record must be corrected, the names must be restored. And it lived in what Voss had said to Durin, broadcast on the same open channel the Empire had used 1,000 years ago, when it delivered the order that had made all of this necessary. The channel that Durin had opened because he had no other option. The channel that Voss had used because she had chosen it specifically, not as cruelty, not as drama, but as precision. The same frequency, the same sector, the same entry vector. Because some statements are only complete when they are made in the place where they were made necessary. We did not come back to be remembered. We came back to make sure you never forgot. The galaxy is a very old place. It has seen erasures before. It has seen civilizations go quiet and stay quiet. It had not, until this morning, seen one come back. The Grand Conclave's session records were updated. The Galactic registry was corrected. Earth was restored to the record with a footnote that simply read, status, present. Not returned, not restored, not recognized posthumously. Present, because that is what 1,000 years of quiet work is in the end. Not a comeback, not a resurrection, not a victory over those who thought the silence meant surrender. Just a civilization that was always there. That was always building. That was always, in the most complete and unambiguous sense of the word, ready. The loudest thing in the universe, it turned out, is not a fleet of 14,000 ships. It is a 2-page document signed by 312 people in 3 cold ships, in the dark, 1,000 years ago. We will return, we will be ready. They were.